The spotlight cut through the cigarette smoke, hanging thick over the Ryman Auditorium in Nashville, Tennessee, on the night of October 7th, 1973. 1,500 people packed into the wooden pews of the old building they called the Mother Church of Country Music, waiting for Johnny Cash to take the stage. Outside, autumn rain drummed against the stained glass windows. Inside, the air hummed with anticipation. But backstage, Johnny Cash stood frozen in the narrow hallway behind the curtain, staring at a letter that had arrived at his dressing room just 30 minutes before showtime. The letter was handwritten in careful, deliberate script on notebook paper. It was from a man named Michael Patterson, a 26-year-old musician from Knoxville who was sitting in the audience that very moment. Michael explained that he had been paralyzed from the waist down in a car accident 2 years earlier, the same accident that killed his wife Sarah and their 3-year-old daughter Emma. He wrote that music was the only thing keeping him alive, that Johnny's song Man in Black had become his anthem during the darkest nights in physical therapy, during the moments when he wanted to give up entirely. But here was the remarkable part of the letter. Michael wrote that he had taught himself to play guitar again, relearning everything from a wheelchair, adapting his entire technique because he could no longer feel the rhythm through his feet tapping on the floor. He had built a special brace to hold his guitar steady. He had practiced 8 hours a day for 18 months, and he had written a song he called Still Standing, about finding the strength to keep going when your body tells you to quit. The letter ended with a simple request. Michael didn't ask for an autograph or a photograph. He asked if, somehow, Johnny Cash might let him play that one song on stage. Just 3 minutes. Just one chance to prove that music could survive anything, even tragedy that breaks you in half. Johnny's manager, a sharp-dressed man named Lou Robin, who had been with him for years, stood beside him in that hallway, shaking his head. "Johnny, we can't do this," Lou said, his voice tight with worry. "We don't know if this guy can actually play. We don't know if his wheelchair will even fit on stage with the band set up. We've got a tight schedule. We've got the set list planned out to the minute, and we've got venue management breathing down our necks about running long." Johnny didn't answer. He just kept reading the letter, his jaw working in that way it did when he was thinking hard about something. Luther Perkins, Johnny's lead guitarist and closest friend, leaned against the wall nearby. Luther had played beside Johnny since the beginning, since the days when they were nobody, playing for whoever would listen. He caught Johnny's eye and gave the smallest nod. "Your call, boss," Luther said quietly. "But you know what the right thing is." Johnny folded the letter carefully and put it in his jacket pocket right over his heart. Then he walked out onto that stage. The crowd exploded into applause. The Tennessee Three launched into Folsom Prison Blues, and Johnny gave them the show they came for, pouring everything into each song, that deep voice of his filling every corner of the Ryman. But between songs, his eyes kept scanning the audience, searching. About 40 minutes into the show, Johnny stopped. He held up his hand and the band fell silent. The audience quieted, confused, wondering what was happening. "I want to tell you folks about something," Johnny said, his voice carrying to the back of the auditorium without any microphone tricks, just pure presence. "About 30 minutes before I walked out here tonight, I received a letter from a young man in the audience. His name is Michael Patterson." Johnny pulled the letter from his pocket and held it up. "Michael lost his wife and his daughter 2 years ago in a car accident. That same accident left him paralyzed from the waist down. He's sitting out there right now in a wheelchair. But he's not here because he feels sorry for himself. He's here because he taught himself to play guitar again. He wrote a song about surviving the unsurvivable. And he asked me if he could play it for you tonight." The audience was dead silent now. You could have heard a pin drop on those wooden floors. "Now, my manager told me this was a bad idea," Johnny continued, and a nervous laugh rippled through the crowd. "He said we don't know if Michael can play. He said we don't have time. He said we don't know what we're getting into." Johnny paused, letting the moment stretch out. "But I've learned something in my life. Sometimes the most important thing you can do is make room for somebody else's story. Sometimes you step aside and let someone else have the light. So, Michael, if you're out there, come on up here. Let's hear that song." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then from the left side of the auditorium, there was movement. The crowd turned to look. A young man in a wheelchair began making his way down the aisle, pushed by an older man who must have been his father. Michael Patterson was thin, almost fragile-looking. Wearing a simple button-down shirt and jeans, he had shoulder-length brown hair and the kind of eyes that had seen too much pain for someone so young. In his lap, he carried a worn acoustic guitar. The audience began to applaud, tentatively at first, then building into something thunderous. People stood up. They kept clapping as Michael's father wheeled him all the way down that long aisle to the stage. But then came the problem nobody had thought about. The Ryman Auditorium stage sat 4 feet off the ground, with stairs on both sides. There was no ramp, no lift, no way for a wheelchair to get up there. Johnny Cash looked at that stage, looked at Michael Patterson sitting at the bottom of those stairs, and without a word, he jumped down. He landed on the floor in front of Michael with a thud that echoed through the building. "You bring that guitar," Johnny said to Michael. "I'll bring you." And before anyone could protest, before Lou or Luther or anyone else could say, "This wasn't safe," or "This wasn't professional," or "This wasn't how things were done," Johnny Cash bent down and lifted Michael Patterson right out of that wheelchair. He carried him up those 4 steps and set him gently down on a chair that Luther had quickly placed center stage. The audience wasn't just applauding anymore. People were crying. Grown men had tears streaming down their faces. Women were clutching their hands to their chests because they were watching something nobody had expected to see, something raw and real and completely unscripted. Michael's father handed the guitar up to the stage. Michael took it with shaking hands, his fingers trembling as he positioned it across his lap. He had a special leather strap system that held the guitar steady against his chest, compensating for the fact that he couldn't brace it with his legs anymore. "Take your time," Johnny said softly, stepping back to give Michael space, but staying close enough to catch him if he fell. Michael closed his eyes. He took a deep breath, and then he started to play. The first notes that came from that guitar were clean and clear, a finger-picking pattern that was intricate and beautiful. His right hand moved with absolute precision, his fingers dancing across the strings. His left hand shaped chords that rang out pure and true. Every single person in that auditorium realized in that moment that Michael Patterson wasn't just someone who could play a little guitar. He was a real musician. Then he started to sing. His voice was nothing like Johnny's deep rumble. It was higher, more vulnerable, with a quality that made you lean in to hear every word. And the words he sang cut straight to the bone. "They tell me I should be grateful that I survived at all. They tell me I should count my blessings, that I didn't lose it all. But they don't know what it's like to wake up and reach for someone who's not there. They don't know what it's like to stand when you can't feel the ground beneath you anywhere." The chorus hit like a freight train. "But I'm still standing, though I'm sitting down. I'm still singing, though I lost my sound. I'm still breathing, though the air is thin. I'm still fighting, and I'll learn to live again." Michael's voice broke on the last word, just for a second, but he pushed through. His fingers never stopped moving on those strings. The guitar filled the space where his voice cracked, holding the melody until he could come back to it. Johnny Cash stood 3 feet away, his arms crossed over his chest, tears running openly down his face. He made no attempt to hide them. Luther Perkins had stopped playing entirely, just watching. The bass player, Marshall Grant, had his hand over his mouth. The entire band was frozen, listening to this young man pour his heart out in front of 1,500 strangers. Michael sang the second verse, about his daughter's favorite song, about his wife's laugh, about the moment he realized they were gone, and he was still here. He sang about learning to hold a guitar pick again when his hands wouldn't stop shaking. He sang about wanting to die and choosing to live. He sang about the fact that sometimes survival isn't a blessing, it's a choice you make every single morning when you open your eyes. The bridge of the song changed the tempo, became almost angry, defiant. So don't you tell me I'm inspirational, don't you dare call me brave. Don't you say everything happens for a reason, or that time will heal the pain. I'm not your motivation poster. I'm not your feel-good story of the year. I'm just a man who lost everything and decided to stay here. Then he brought it back down, made it soft again, made it true. I'm still standing, though I'm sitting down. I'm still singing, though I lost my sound. I'm still breathing, though the air is thin. I'm still fighting, and I'll learn to live again. As Michael played the final notes, letting them ring out into the silence, something remarkable happened. Johnny Cash walked over and stood beside him. He didn't say anything. He didn't take over the song. He just stood there, one hand resting on Michael's shoulder, being present with him in that moment. When the last note faded, the silence that followed was absolute. It wasn't the silence of not knowing what to do. It was the silence of 1,500 people who had just witnessed something sacred, something true, something that changed them. Then the applause came like a wave, like a storm, like nothing that old building had ever heard before. People were on their feet, crying and clapping and shouting. They clapped for 5 solid minutes. Some sources who were there that night say it was longer, that it went on for 7 or 8 minutes, that nobody wanted to stop because stopping would mean the moment was over. Johnny Cash bent down and spoke directly into Michael's ear, though the microphone picked it up. "You've got more courage in your little finger than I've got in my whole body," Johnny said, "and you've got a gift. Don't you ever stop sharing it." Then Johnny turned to the audience. "I've played with the biggest names in music," he said. "I've shared stages with Elvis Presley and Bob Dylan and June Carter, but I've never, in my entire career, been more honored to share a stage with someone than I am right now with Michael Patterson. And I'll tell you something else. We're going to sing one more song together, if he's willing." Michael looked up at Johnny with an expression of pure disbelief. "What song?" Michael asked, his voice barely audible. "Man in Black," Johnny said. "You wrote in your letter that it kept you going, so let's sing it together. You take the verses with me. Show me how it sounds when someone who really knows what it means to wear black sings it." And they did. Johnny Cash and Michael Patterson sang Man in Black together on the stage of the Ryman Auditorium, while 1,500 people listened in reverent silence. Michael's voice blended with Johnny's, that higher, vulnerable tone mixing with the deep rumble, creating something entirely new. When they got to the lines about wearing black for the poor and beaten down, for the prisoner who has long paid for his crime, Michael sang like those words were written about him, like he understood them in a way most people never would. When the song ended, Johnny lifted Michael again, carried him down those stairs, and placed him gently back in his wheelchair. Then he did something nobody expected. He took off his own guitar strap, a black leather strap he'd used for years, and he gave it to Michael. "You keep making music," Johnny said. "The world needs to hear what you have to say." What happened after that night became part of country music legend. Johnny Cash personally called Columbia Records and insisted they give Michael Patterson a recording contract. Michael recorded 3 albums over the next 5 years. Still Standing became a minor hit, reaching number 42 on the country charts. But more importantly, it became an anthem for people dealing with disability, loss, and trauma. It's still played at rehabilitation centers across America today. But here's what most people don't know. Johnny Cash kept in touch with Michael for the rest of Johnny's life. They wrote letters back and forth. Johnny invited Michael to open for him on 6 different tours. When Michael eventually met a woman named Rebecca and got married in 1977, Johnny Cash sang at the wedding. When Michael and Rebecca had their first child, a daughter they named Emma after Michael's lost little girl, Johnny was asked to be the godfather. In an interview years later, Michael Patterson said something that cuts right to the heart of what happened that night in 1973. "Johnny didn't have to do what he did," Michael said. "He had nothing to gain from it. I was nobody, but he saw past the wheelchair and the tragedy and the whole sob story. He saw a musician. He saw someone who had something to say, and he gave me the platform to say it. That night changed my life, but not in the way people think. It didn't fix my legs. It didn't bring my family back. What it did was remind me that my story wasn't over, that I still had music to make, that I still mattered. Johnny Cash spent his entire career singing for the forgotten, the broken, the people nobody else wanted to see. He sang for prisoners and addicts and outsiders. But on that October night in 1973, he did more than sing for them. He invited one of them onto the stage and said, "Your voice matters as much as mine." That's the real story behind that duet. It wasn't about Johnny Cash being a hero. It was about Johnny Cash recognizing that heroism was already there in the audience, sitting in a wheelchair, holding a guitar, choosing to make music instead of giving up. The entire moment was recorded by someone in the audience on a portable tape recorder. The recording is scratchy and distant, but you can hear everything. You can hear Michael's voice breaking and recovering. You can hear the 5 minutes of applause. You can hear Johnny saying, "You've got more courage in your little finger." That recording is now in the Country Music Hall of Fame, labeled as one of the most important moments in the history of live country music performance. So if you're facing something that feels impossible, if you're dealing with loss that seems unsurvivable, if you think your story is over because something terrible happened, remember Michael Patterson. Remember that he lost everything and chose to pick up a guitar anyway. Remember that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is keep making your music, whatever that music is, even when the world tells you to give up. And remember that sometimes, if you're brave enough to ask, someone might just hand you a microphone and say, "Let's hear what you have to say." If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Leave a comment and tell me, what's your still standing moment? What's the thing you kept doing even when everything told you to quit? I read every single comment, and your stories matter just as much as this one.